Warm good afternoon to all. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. So, first of all, I would like to congratulate the Department of English, Government College Thrissur, for hosting the workshop on post theory. And I would like to thank my former colleague, Rosina, for inviting me as the speaker for this particular session of the post theory workshop. I also thank the student coordinators. As you know, my talk is titled Listening to the Other Within the Other, Reading Dalit Feminist Writings. As you can see, the first other in the title is the Dalit woman, who is the other of the male self, who in turn is the other of Brahmanical self. Therefore, the second other in the title is Dalit male. So what I want to say is that Dalit woman is the Dalit of Dalits. She is the other within the Dalit community. And you see the second other, besides being the, besides signifying the Dalit male subject, can also stand for the upper caste woman. In other words, Dalit woman is also the other of the upper caste female self. So, the other within the other signifies Dalit women, who are the other of the high caste women, as well as the other of Dalit community, being the other of the Dalit masculine subject. And I have structured my session to two parts. First, I will briefly introduce Dalit feminism, talk about the Dalit feminist movement as a post-feminist nativist movement, as a reactionary movement against the feminist movement, as well as the Dalit movement. Then I will also talk about the importance of Dalit feminism to interrogate the denial of Dalit women's agency in dominant discourses like feminism and Dalit literature. So in the second part of my session, I will, this will be a practical one. And as you know, more than theorizing, it is important for us to learn from the Dalit women's voices. So in the second part of the session, which is a practical one, we will analyze two representative Dalit poems in order to understand how Dalit women's voices are articulated in the medium of Dalit feminist writings. So, coming to Dalit feminism, you know, it emerged as a distinct academic and cultural movement in the 1990s, coinciding with the sprouting of post-feminism. While post-feminism, you know, focuses on the internal conflicts and contradictions and absences within feminism, as a global phenomena, Dalit feminism inaugurates such an approach in the Indian feminist school. As far as Dalit women are concerned, one of the most important exclusions that they face in India is that their issues are never part of the struggles by feminists. Therefore, as a post-feminist nativist movement, Dalit feminism questions Indian feminism's reluctance to address the predicament of Dalit women under the oppressing apparatuses of caste and gender discrimination. The Dalit, the feminist discourses, the Dalit feminist discourses questions feminism's its hegemonic impulse to speak for the other, to represent all women. But in feminist discourses, it's often the questions of gender and class that gets the priority, and the question of caste gets submerged. But the fact is that it is the intersectional oppression of caste, gender, and class which is responsible for the crippled state of Dalit women's existence. But you know that right from the origin of feminism, from its Western roots, feminism in India has been conceived as opposition to patriarchy, and hence the emphasis was always on gender rather than caste. And also, because feminism is more aligned to the left ideology, especially in India, you can see that the so-called Marxist feminists, though they have examined the intersection between gender and class, they have not explored the intersection between gender and caste. As a result, while Dalit women's gender oppression, Dalit women's subordination to patriarchy was theorized, and the different kinds of exclusion that Dalit women face in the patriarchal society, as well as their economic exploitation under feudalism and capitalism, were at least partially addressed. Feminists, they completely failed in the theorization of Dalit women's caste subalternity. And therefore, the problems that Dalit women face on account of caste subalternity, such as untouchability, the sexual assault on Dalit women by upper caste men, and the violence inflicted on Dalit women by Dalit men, etc., were never looked into. So, one of the reasons for the failure of Indian feminism to look into these issues affecting Dalit women is because of the limitations of their theoretical framework, because of the limitations in their class-based approach. Because they give primacy to class and refuse to accept caste as a basic structure. I mean, particularly those so-called Marxist feminists. Now, this trend you can see even in our state as well, which is a state have been ruled for long by the left parties. So, Dalit feminism, like post-feminism, calls into question the Dalit feminism's tendency to reject caste as a basic unit and to focus on class and gender oppression of Dalit women. And yet another tendency, is that the Indian feminism has a hegemonic impulse to speak for all women. Right from the early days of feminist movement, it was concerned about the experience of upper class, middle class, high caste women. It was their problems, it was their experience that was projected as those of Indian women. Now, for example, you can see in its early days, there was so much talk about the problems that women face in upper caste communities, like um, sati, widowhood, question of widow remarriage, lack of women's mobility, etc. And there was no talk about the problems that Dalit women faced in the society on account of their being the gendered caste subaltern. So this tendency of Dalit feminists, feminists in general, uh, to essentialize and nationalize the experience and identity of high caste women is being questioned by Dalit feminists. So, the tendency to essentialize the experience of women, as you all know, is based on the general misconception that patriarchy is a cross-cultural constant, which cuts across class and caste boundaries, regional and national boundaries. And of course, patriarchy is a universal phenomena. But the point is, the way women experience it differ from one culture to another, from one particular class situation to another. So therefore, because of the universalizing of the patriarchy and patriarchal oppression of women, the feminism is basically founded on the notion of common oppression. Now, the notion of shared oppression of all women being victims of patriarchy, regardless of the difference in the socio-cultural locations and differences in their experiences, in fact, veil the contradiction within Indian feminism too. But of course, during the troubled times of the 1990s, especially during the anti-Mandel agitations, these contradictions really came to light. As you are aware, the nationwide protest against the implementation of the controversial Mandel Commission report, in fact, brought to the forefront the caste divisions of Indian society. And it also sharpened the divisions between the upper caste and Dalit lower caste women. Because as you know, during the anti-Mandel agitations, the high caste middle class women had taken a stance against the interest of the Dalits. And as you might have read, Susi Tharu, in her famous introduction to the book, Women Writing in India, she writes how these protesting young women, the young university students, were holding the placards that read, "We want employed husbands." So the point is, these high caste women fear that if the recommendations of the Mandel Commission report is implemented, it will really affect their prospects. They will fail to, their prospective husbands will be left jobless, as because the new reservation policy implied for them sacrifice of merit in government jobs. Of course, this was a moment of realization as far as Dalit lower caste women were concerned, because they understood that the feminist idea of common oppression is simply an empty rhetoric. They understood that in addition to being oppressed by caste patriarchy and Dalit patriarchy alike as the second sex, they are also oppressed by the upper caste women on account of their caste subalternity. And such a moment of realization was crucial in the evolution of Dalit feminist politics in the 1990s, following the decades centering the Mandel Commission report. Following the decades centering the debate on Mandel Commission report. And as you can see, correspondingly, there was also a growing scholarly interest on the theorization of the Dalit women's multiple marginalities. Works by noted feminist scholars like Elinor Elliott, Anubhama Rao, Uma Chakravarti, and Shamila Reish, and Gopal Guru. There are many others, of course, were produced during the post-90s and in the early early decade of the 21st century, which in fact helped in the formulation of Dalit feminist standpoint. And but of course, this is not to say that Dalit feminism is an entirely new phenomenon. Of course, it is, as I told you, is a post-feminist development questioning it's a reactionary movement questioning the feminist movement and Dalit movement. Of course, it's a new phenomenon, but it has a tradition that you must understand, which goes back to even the previous century, because there were many social reformers in India who had addressed the question of Dalit women's subordination, not just in the high caste, the upper caste dominated in Indian society, but also even in Dalit society. And the how Jyotiba Phule took the cause of Dalit women, and how Savitri Phule opened schools for Dalit women, and even in our neighboring state of Tamil Nadu, how people like Periyar, E.V. Ramaswamy, promoted self-respect, marriages, and things like that. So, what I want to say that though Dalit feminist movement can be seen as a new development, it has a tradition that goes back to the history of anti-caste agitations led by people like Jyotiba Phule, Periyar, and of course the key figure who gave visibility to Dalit women is, of course, Dr. Ambedkar. And in all his movements, his great Dalit movement for the emancipation of the untouchables, he had given priority to the women's question. Now, we will come to that issue later. So what I want to say is that the Dalit feminist movement is a post-feminist phenomena which questions the absences of Dalit women and their problems in the feminist agenda. Now, in fact, it is not only in feminist movements that Dalit women face exclusion. Dalit women are also denied agency in Dalit socio-cultural movement. So, I feel that the newly emergent Dalit feminism in India can be seen both as an outgrowth of Dalit social and literary movement, as well as a reaction against it. So, as you know, in Dalit literature, Dalit, you already know Dalit literature, so I don't have to go deep into the concerns of Dalit literature. But in Dalit literature, it is concerned about the physical and psychological suffering of humanity and of all oppressed class of people, and particularly those people who are oppressed in terms of caste and caste subalternity. And therefore, though it is concerned about the oppression of Dalit, lower caste, it is also concerned about the oppression of all categories of people. So, particularly, it is concerned about the oppression of Dalits and lower caste people. And in the social construct of, because in the social construct of hierarchical caste system, the Dalits and the lower castes are oppressed and victimized. So Dalit literature specifically speaks about the victimization of Dalits and lower caste in the caste-dominated Indian society. But you see, the Dalit literature has its own problems. The Dalit is both dominated and dominating. I would like to put it that way. Because there is a tendency in Dalit male writings, to give you an example, to exclude or stereotypes Dalit women's voices. So, see, for example, in Dalit life writing, it is the concerns of the Dalit male self that always get articulated, and the issues of the gendered caste subalterns are either subsumed under the issues faced by the male author, who is also the protagonist in the so-called Dalit male autobiographies. And sometimes the Dalit women is also given a token representation. And if you look into the narrative part, the narrative is recounted from the experiential memory of the masculine subject, and who figures in multiple roles, as I already mentioned, as the author, the narrator, the protagonist. And in this framework of Dalit autobiography, the Dalit female is denied voice, as her agency is located outside the frame of narrative. And even when, as I told you, she's given token representation, the Dalit female is depicted stereotypically as an object of the upper caste atrocities, as an object of, or a victim of caste and patriarchy. So, victim of caste patriarchy. And therefore she exists as a shadowy figure in the fringes of the narrative of Dalit writings, devoid of their voice and agency. Whereas if you look into Dalit feminist writings, you can see that here the Dalit women assume a voice and agency which she is denied in her in the writings of the male counterparts. And the so-called Dalit feminist writings gives us a new understanding about the Dalit women's life and experience, which is denied in Dalit masculinist writings. So you can just call the male-dominated Dalit male-dominated writings as Dalitist, Dalit plus masculinist. So in these writings, the gendered caste subaltern is denied agency. Now, to explicate this fact, I would give you the example of the famous autobiographies written by people like Sharan Kumar Lempale, Hisagar Mashi, for example, where he would even say that his mother was a prostitute who sold her body to the upper caste Patel, and it is on account of that he suffers this status of being an Akarmashi or an outcast, because he is a half caste. He doesn't belong to the Patel caste or to the Dalit community. So he would put all the blame on his mother. So this kind of masculinization of Dalit literature is being questioned by Dalit feminist writers. And you know, Dalit feminist writings also bring to light certain tall claims made by Dalit intellectuals like Kancha Ilaya, who would say that in Dalit society, in Dalit communities, the Dalit patriarchy is less oppressive. I think most of you would have read his famous work, Why I Am Not a Hindu. And in this book, there is a section titled Our Women and Their Women, and where he talks about, where he makes a comparative analysis of the status of women in Dalit community and in upper caste community. And he makes a claim that in Dalit patriarchy is less intense and hierarchical compared to Hindu patriarchy. So what I want to say is that the so-called Dalit feminist writings subverts this kind of tall claims made by Dalit male intellectuals in respect of Dalit community. So, what is striking about the Dalit feminist narratives is the fact that in spite of the adverse factors that affect Dalit women's life, on account of caste and patriarchy, the Dalit women, they exhibit a lot of courage and resilience in facing these adverse circumstances, and they transform the very conditions of their life. Now, this fact is demonstrated in Dalit women's testimonies like Bama's Karikor Sangadi, Urmila Pawa's The View of My Life, or Baby Campbell's The Prisons We Broke, to give you only a very few examples. And so in these writings, what you see is that in the place of the image of the silent and submissive other, which you come across in Dalit male writings, it is the image of the bold and enduring Dalit women that you come across in the writings of so-called Dalit feminist writers like Baba, Baby Campbell, Bama, Urmila Pawa, Meena Kandasamy, and Rekha Raj, and so on. So, what is also to be noted is that although there is a representation of collective themes that appear in the narratives of these writers, the expression of these themes vary from one writer to another, or one work to another, depending on the differences in the experiences of Dalit women on the basis of their socio-economic status, their cultural conditions, their age, and etc. etc. So, in other words, what I would like to say is that Dalit feminist writing is not a monolithic entity, but rather it is characterized by a lot of heterogeneity. And this fact will be evident when you analyze the so-called Dalit feminist writings, which I just mentioned. So, Bama's autobiography will be different from that of Urmila Pawa, or again, Baby Campbell will be giving you the histories of Dalit community, which is again totally different from that of the community of Dalits, the so-called Paraya community represented in Bama's writings. But at the same time, you can also find certain common themes in their writings because of the intersectional oppression of caste and patriarchy, which is represented in most of their writings. And the so-called Dalit feminists, they also deconstruct the Dalit historiography that often tend to exclude the voice of women, the histories of women, and they try to explore alternative ways of articulating their histories. Now, this is very radical about the Dalit feminist writings. So, perhaps, as you know, as I already mentioned, that a large number of Dalit women had actively participated in Dalit movements spearheaded by Dr. Ambedkar for the democratic civil rights of the untouchable in pre-independence India. And many of them were in leadership position in the various agitations of Dr. Ambedkar. But unfortunately, the important roles that they played in the agitations, in the anti-caste campaigns of Ambedkar is not properly reported in Dalit representations of the same. As a typical example, I can suggest the noted Dalit writer Narendra Jadav's famous autobiography, Outcast, which I'm sure that at least some of you would have read. The one important aspect of this work is that it is the historical assertion of Dalits led by Dr. Ambedkar which forms the backdrop of this brilliant work. In fact, the synchronization of Jadav's family history with the history of Ambedkar's movement forms the warp and woof of the narrative design of this brilliant work. And the narrative structure of the work is very important, because three generations of Dalits figure in this particular text, comparing and contrasting the days of Ambedkar and the days of independence. So and also there are the parallel movements. On the one hand, you can see a lot of references to the nationalist movement led by Gandhi and people like that, and the Ambedkar's movement, which developed as a parallel movement, intersecting with the other movement, especially in situations like where Ambedkar had a lot of differences with Gandhi and the signing of Pune Pact. Of course, these historical details are all mentioned in this particular book. So you can say this is it's a kind of historical fiction or fictionalized history. But the problem is that in the movement of Dr. Ambedkar, with the various anti-caste campaigns, especially there is a reference to the famous Kalaram Temple agitation, Mahat Satyagraha, and the massive conversion of Dalits to Buddhism, etc. And it's such historical events are given in full detail with the names of prominent figures who participated in it. But unfortunately, there is a characteristic absence of the Dalit women's participation in Ambedkar's movement in the account provided by Ms. Jadav's book. And this kind of denial of agency of Dalit women in Dalit patriarchal discourses are indeed countered by the Dalit feminists by producing alternative counter-cultural discourses. And it is here that Baby Campbell's The Prisons We Broke and Urmila Power and Meenakshi Moon's work, we also made history too, which detail the history of women's participation in Dalit movement of Ambedkar becomes very significant. So I just also wanted to say that it is not just the representation of Dalit women which is being questioned. I mean, the representation of Dalit women in Dalit male writings that is being questioned, or the exclusion of the voice and agency of Dalit women, which is being questioned in Dalit feminist autobiographies. And on the other hand, the Dalit feminist autobiographies, they also give us an insight into the life and experience of the other within the other. And the Dalit feminist writers also question the Dalit representation of Dalit history. And I think this is one of the key challenges for Dalit feminism today. That is to reinvent the tradition of the gendered caste subalterns, social and historic articulations, because of the fact that the elite historians, and we have already seen how Dalit historians or writers do that, the elite historians, they tend to deny Dalit women their role in their own historical articulation. So what I'm saying is that it is both in dominant discourses as well as in subaltern discourses like feminism and Dalit writing that Dalit women are denied their agency. So how the Dalit women are denied agency in the dominant discourses of history, I will give you the various narratives constructed around the historic Chana revolt of the 19th century by some of the leading historians of Kerala history. And before I analyze some of the mainstream historical narratives on Chana revolt, I would like to give you some background knowledge regarding the Chana women's agitations. So as you perhaps know, that in the 19th century, women were not allowed to cover their upper body parts. Okay, and only the high caste Nambudiri women were supposed to cover their uh, uh, upper body with a second cloth. And even Nair women, for that matter, had to keep their breasts bare before the Nambudiri Brahmins. So, the stripping of the upper cloth, whether it is for men or women, remained as a giving respect to the upper caste. And you might have seen this in where the male, the people belonging to the lower caste move around without any keeping their upper body bare, and especially the male subjects, when they come across the upper caste people, they move away, move their dress, etc. So removing the dress was a kind of a way of showing respect to the upper caste people in the 19th century and even in the early part of the 20th century. The Chana revolt took place when the converted lower caste women, the lower caste Chana community converted to Christianity in large numbers in order to avoid caste discrimination in Hindu society. And as a result of the missionary work in Chanar community, Chanas were later renamed as the Nadas by the Madras government. This is all part of history. So these converted women from Chanar community began to wear dress. That was the first, the main reason for the Chanar revolt. And the reason why these women wanted to put on clothes is because of the influence of the Christian morality. So you have an idea about the kind of Victorian morality that was propagated here. So prompted by the missionaries, the Chanar women who were converted to Christianity began to wear dress like the upper caste women using a male mund. And this defiance of social custom by the Chanas was resisted by the Nair community. And this led to the conflict. And as the tension increased between the two communities, the Diwan of Travancore, Colonel Munro, issued a proclamation stating that Chanar women who converted to Christianity can wear jackets or blouses like the women in other Christian communities do, like the Syrian or Latin Christian communities do. But they are not supposed to wear second cloth like the Nair women. But the Chanar women continue to wear male mund, defying the authority and caste orthodoxy alike. And this led to further conflict. And the reason why the Chanar women were insisted on wearing the upper cloth or male mund is the fact that it was considered as a symbol of modesty at that time. Okay. Now I can see an extension of this interestingly, girls wearing scarf along with the churidar, even these days, and many women would feel uncomfortable if they don't wear their shawl. Okay, so anyway, after decades-long agitation, the Chanar women obtained their right to dress in 1859 when an order was given removing all restrictions on them by the Travancore government. And this is the background of this is in nutshell what the Marmarakal Samaram or breath clause movement was. Now, going through the annals of history, you can find only few agitations in India before the Chanar agitation, when the lower caste women fought for their rights. And almost half a century resisting the attacks of caste patriarchy. Now, it's also worth remembering that the Chanar women's agitation was conducted much before the birth of Indian feminism itself, and even much before Dr. Ambedkar's movement for the rights of the untouchables. So it is to be noted that the birth cloth movement was not only aimed at covering the female body as a liberal Western ideal, as it is often made out to be by colonialist historians and even some of the national historians. But indeed, it was their attempt to enter into the standards of social dignity. Because, as I told you before, the demand of the Chanar women was not for the right to cover their breasts like the women in other upper caste, other Christian communities did. And that is why, even when the Divan permitted them to wear jackets or blouses, they continued wearing melmund like upper caste Nair women. Now, this is a very important thing. Okay, so the breastcloth agitation is demonstrative of the lower caste women's culture of resistance and their ability to assert their agency even in the face of most adverse circumstances. So what I wanted to emphasize is that in Tanar women's agitation, you can find the history, a tradition of Dalit feminism in India. And it is these kind of historic moments that which the subaltern historians, the subaltern feminist writers and the researchers should focus on. Because the Dalit feminist movement, as I told you, though it is a post-feminist phenomena, it has a long tradition that goes to even the 19th century. So that is one point that I wanted to emphasize. And, the important point is that though there are many instances in history, like the Chana Lehla or the Kallumala Samaram, or the strike against the breast attacks. Of course, as students and researchers, you are aware of this history of such movements. So in all these agitations, Dalit lower caste women were at the forefront. But then the point is, they question the logical practices endorsed by caste and orthodoxy in Kerala in the history. But then the historical records, especially produced by those elite historians, tend to deny the subaltern women her agency. Now, this is a very important aspect which we'll be looking into by analyzing some of the historical narratives constructed around the Chana revolt. And not only that, while denying the Chanar women their agency, there is a general tendency by historians to attribute the subject position to exterior factors such as colonial modernity, missionary work, the benevolence of colonial administrators, and native rulers. So rather than accepting the fact that it was the revolting, resilient spirit of the subaltern woman, it was their courage that in fact led to the success of the agitation. The historians, they try to assign the subject position to exterior factors like the colonial administration, the support of the colonial administration, which the Chanar women, of course, they had, and the work of the missionaries. But you must understand the fact that the missionaries were not for a direct confrontation with the caste orthodoxy here because of their commercial as well as religious interest, because that would have affected their civilizing mission. Therefore they took the women on the front of the agitation. But then the point is, the Chanar women's agitation also demonstrate the limited agency of the Chanar women. As I already mentioned, that they were not demanding for the right to cover their body as a liberal ideology or as a religious requirement. Because they wanted to dress like the upper caste Nayak women. So they were demonstrating their right for equality. It's a very important point. But unfortunately, in some of the narratives constructed by Kerala historians, these facts have been just sidelined. Now, for instance, the noted historian A. Sridharamenon, in his famous work, A Survey of Kerala History, though he says that Chana revolt had profound bearing on Kerala society as the first successful agitation against caste system, nevertheless, he fails to give due credit to Chanar women who were the main actors in the revolt. And instead, he says that it was the support of the colonial administration that proved to be decisive and that led to the success of the Chanar women's agitation. And he also acknowledges the initiative taken by the Travancore government. Now, another strategic way of denying the subaltern women her agency is by the historian is by observing sanctioned silence about the revolt of Chanar women as such. Now, take the case of noted Malayalam Dalit writer and critic P.K. Balakrishnan's famous work, Jati Vyavasthayum Kerala Charitram. And of course, the book contains a detailed description of the decade of the Chana revolt and the early part of the 19th century. The book is particularly about the description of the caste revolts of the 19th century. But see, there is a noticeable absence of any reference to the Chana revolt. Now, Balakrishnan, of course, he expresses the opinion that this particular period is in which the Chana revolt took place is remarkable for the formation of caste politics in Kerala. But then he is not specific about it. As you know, the fact, along with the many factors, the successful campaign of Chana women had played a very important role in shaping the caste politics in the early days of Kerala Renaissance. But unfortunately, P.K. Balakrishnan, he downplays it by observing silence about the revolt as such. So there is no reference to Chana revolt in this particular book. And of course, he says that the period is outstanding for the formation of the caste struggles in Kerala history, but there is no mention about the Chana women and their agitation. And another noted historian is P. Shangunnimenon. And this, you might have read the history of Travancore is the most important work by of Shangunnimenon. And in this book, he condemns the outrageous attitude of the subaltern caste, which he says caused the, which is responsible for the agitation. And this statement becomes important when you consider the fact that the history of Travancore, the book History of Travancore was written just less than two decades after the Chana revolt. So to say that Shangunnimenon sides with the upper caste sentiments of the time in discussing the Chana revolt and condemning the outrageous attitude of the lower caste. So, as I mentioned, the Chana revolt was a momentous struggle against the oppressive practices of caste system of the 19th century. And of course, the gendered subalterns emerged as active agents of the revolt, as we have already seen. But the mainstream historians have erased their role. And it is because of such erasures that Gayatri Spivak says that the subaltern cannot speak. In other words, it is elite discourses that render the subaltern subject mute in history. Okay, and the subaltern discourses like feminism, which attempts to give visibility to Dalit women, to have a very important role in constructing alternative histories or rewriting the histories of subaltern women's articulations. And as I already mentioned, this is already being done by the Dalit feminists outside Kerala. And I already made a mention of the books like The Prisons We Broke, or we also made history too, or there are many other books which deals with this rewriting of the Dalit women's histories. So, but then unfortunately, such a work is not being undertaken by Dalit feminists in Kerala, because maybe Dalit feminism is in its nascent form in Kerala. But of course, the Dalit feminist writers are active in the literary scene, and they are able to articulate the multiple marginality of Dalit women. There are other within the other situation, as will be evident from the analysis of the two poems we have selected for the workshop. And since it is a workshop, I feel that it's not enough that I talk to you all the time, but we need to analyze some representative samples in order to come to the feminist standpoints. So with this brief introduction, shall we move on to the practical session of analyzing the Dalit poems, which I have already given to you. I think these poems are with you, and you have gone through these poems. Now, what's time now? Okay, it's already going to be 3 o'clock. So, shall we move to a quick analysis of the two poems which we have selected?
Yes, sir.
Or shall we wait for
Sure, sir,
your
sure.
questions now? What should we do? I think we will reserve the questions for the last, because if only we discuss these two poems, you will be able to digest the ideas that I put across. What do you say about it?
Sir, the poems have already been shared in the WhatsApp group, so I think the
Oh,
participants must have gone through it. So you can review the poems. Then I think we'll take the questions towards the end, sir.
all right. All right. So then we
Okay.
will go for a quick analysis of these poems. These two poems written by Vijila Chirappat, one of the most vocal feminist writers in Malayalam Dalit literature today. Actually, these two poems are published in Oxford India Anthology of Dalit Writings on Malayalam and Tamil. So many of you are aware of these poems, and of course, I will give you the poems. Somebody asked me to share the poem. I will just present them. I'll present the poems for you, so we'll have a reflection on these poems. So, and I have prepared a few slides, so I'll just share them with you. Okay. Hello, can you see my window?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay, okay. So, can you see my slide?
Yes, sir. Yes.
The two poems are the first one, I can't grow my nails, and I'll share the text with you. Yeah, this is the text of the poem. Are you able to read it? Can somebody from you read it out so that we can all hear?
Sir, the text is not visible.
Uh, you can zoom it in your mobile phones, because this is maximum. If you zoom, you can see it, you can read it. Can somebody read it out?
Sir, you didn't change the slide.
Slide change ചെയ്തല്ലേ?
Okay,
Sir,
now
that,
now
I can't grow my nails. Please, yes, sir.
Yes. Can somebody read it out? Because the poem was already given to you, and somebody, if you have gone through it, please read it out. Or we will go for a silent reading if you want to read the poem. It's good if somebody reads it out. So then,
Okay, sir, may I?
yeah, please do.
Yeah. I can't grow my nails by gazing at the long nail. Don't ever forget anything, everything. Like the woman seated before TV serials. When teeth and nails search for the woman who resists, it's not pressing the mobile keypad, not surfing on the computer. It's all being stunted with wounds and calluses. With the ups of the grinding stones and the lows of the floor, a graph rises on the nail. Nail polish begins to flake along with the blackened vessels. When the nails break, they could be completely trimmed, the course to perfected. Do maintain the grown nails of least one finger, like an iron nail, to pierce those venomous fingers that dare touch your body. Complying with the poet's words, these remains a nail half broken, to scratch, to rend.
Yes, you read it well.
Thank you, sir.
Before? So in order to help you share your thoughts with us, I have here a few thought flakes for you to ponder over. So, is it visible to you? Am I
Yes.
being audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, just think on these questions. The first question, which are the two worlds of women presented in the poem? I mean, the two contrasting women's worlds presented in the poem, especially in the beginning part of the. I would like someone to comment on this. Just read
Sir,
the. Yes, please come
sir,
on.
I think one is modern woman with a phone in her hand. Then
Yes.
other one is a poor woman who's working as a servant or dishwashing thing.
Okay, that's a very good observation. So there are two pictures here, and the two pictures are contrasting. Any other comments on that question?
So from that we can assume that one is a higher caste or upper caste women, and other one is a lower caste or Dalit women who is oppressed by the by her position in a society, and about that she's talking, no, maintain the grown nails of at least one finger, so that she can pierce who dare to touch her body and everything. So I think she's trying to resist the oppression of by the other, maybe patriarchal men, or maybe other women of the society.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, you have understood the poem perfectly well. So, why does the speaker advise them to maintain the ground nail of at least one finger? So, you have given the reason. Although it is said that the Dalit women cannot afford to have a long nails, polished nails like the upper caste women or upper class women, the poet advises her friend to maintain the ground nail of at least one finger. So, where does that reference come? To maintain the ground nail of at least one finger, like an iron nail. That reference is very important. The iron nail.
Christ.
Okay. For what purpose? To pierce those venomous fingers that dare touch your body. What is the reference? What is the implication of the synecdoche venomous fingers here? Venomous fingers stand for?
It refers to the abusive men.
Yes, exactly. So the reference is to the outsiders. Okay. So to resist the outsiders, you have to maintain an iron-like nail. Okay. Are Dalit women abused in society? Did this reference take you to anywhere? To any contemporary incident in Kerala? Reference to the venomous fingers? Why is it important that the subaltern women should keep an iron-like nail to resist the oppression by caste patriarchy, right? Oppression by Dalit patriarchy. Yes. Then what is the implication of graph on the nail of the women? There is a reference to graph on the nail. Can anyone speak out? Implication of graph on the nail. Please share your views. The third stanza of the poem, with the ups of the grinding stones and the lows of the floor, a graph rises on the nail. What is this graph?
Physical labor.
Yes, because of physical labor.
Also, graph could imply the frequency with which Dalit women are molested or harassed in the society.
Yeah, it could be. So the graph shows the hardship of the women. Graph on the nail, uneven nail. And they could be completely trimmed. That shows to perfect it. So it's an uneven graph. Sometimes it's rising. So the oppression that women face, the hardships that they face, leave its marks on their fingers. That is why the fingers are stunted with wounds and calluses. There's a reference in the second stanza too. Well, we'll not go to a deeper level analysis of the poem for want of time. Now let us come to the voices in the Dalit voices in the poem. Who are the speakers in the poem? Who speaks in the poem? Or is there more than one? What is your take on that? Yes. There is a clue in the last stanza with regard to who is speaking in the poem. How many
The
personages?
poet.
Yes, please come on.
Sir, is it the poet who is the speaker?
Yeah, one of the speakers. Is there anybody else in the poem? Speaking in the poem? Is it a single Dalit voice that you hear? Dalit woman's voice? See, the poem is in the form of an address. Who is the addresser and who is being addressed?
The poet is addressing to a Dalit woman.
Yes. She is talking to another Dalit woman. Who is the other Dalit woman? Where is the reference about her? Where does it come? Both in the first stanza as well as in the last stanza, you can see that. Gazing at the long nail, don't ever forget everything, like the woman seated before TV serials. So she is telling her friend, maybe a mother is telling her child, a Dalit mother, subaltern mother, telling her daughter, don't be like that woman. You are not supposed to grow nails. You don't have the leisure. You cannot afford to have the luxury of growing nails, long polished nails, with which you will press the mobile keyboard or surf on the computer. But your nails are not meant for that work. And towards the last stanza, you have a reply from the person who is being addressed. And what does she say? Yes, come on. You didn't get that? So, in the last part of the stanza, you can see it is not the poet who speaks. It is the person, the Dalit girl, the poor girl who speaks to the reader. See, complying with the poet's words, there remains a nail half broken, to scratch, to rend. To scratch and to rip to pieces. Whom are those venomous fingers that dare touch your body? So there are two speakers in the poem. Maybe, of course, the poet talking to her, the fellow Dalit women, and in the last concluding stanza, the Dalit woman is speaking to the reader, or maybe she is addressing the outsiders. So, complying with the poet's words, I have a half broken nail. So, now, how do you look into this poem with the ideas that I have given to you? Like I was talking about how Dalit feminist movement questions the movement of Dalit feminism. I mean, the movement of the feminist movement, as it also questions the reacts against the oppression from by patriarchy and things like that. So how do you connect that? So going back to the first question, there are two worlds of women represented in the poem. So the poem undercuts the very idea of shared oppression here. Do you feel so? What is the
Yes,
poet's take on the concept of common oppression of women? Are women all equally oppressed?
No.
Sir,
Yes.
So I feel the two worlds that you were talking about, I think it is it's more like a criticism on the feminist movement, or like, because the upper class women who is more privileged, who is having the leisure to watch TV serials, or who is privileged to have mobile phone or computer and to surf on them. But on the other hand, there is this Dalit women who is Dalit woman who is living on the basis of his physical labor, and also she is also oppressed by the patriarchal society, and that is very well reflected in the poem. And that's why the poet advised the Dalit women to keep long nails as an iron nail to pierce the venomous fingers and all.
All right. I totally agree with what you said, but there can also be an extension, because the affluent women belonging to the privileged society, they are able to have this luxury, extricating the labor of the Dalit woman. If she is able to while away her time before the TV serials, to keep her, spend time on polishing her nails, pressing on the mobile phones, surfing the computer, and it's all because of the labor power, by extricating the labor power of the subaltern women, who washes the blackened vessels, who does all the odd jobs. It can be extended that way also. So are women also oppressor and the oppressed in that sense? It can be, right? All right. So the two worlds of the women are contrasted, and there is also the outside world of patriarchy, which also oppress the women. And in this oppression of Dalit women, she is left alone. There is no question of the shared oppression. Now, I think the power of this poem emanates from the objective correlative used. Just with the metaphor of a finger, the poet is able to bring to us the world of suffering of Dalit women. But this is not just the hapless, silent, submissive, the picture of the hapless, silent, submissive women that comes across through the poem. The resisting women. Say, why should the woman keep her nails? Of course, to resist, to protect herself. So the voice of the Dalit female that you hear in the poem is not of the silent victim alone, but a woman who can resist, who is a woman who is conscious of her identity. This is very important. So the woman is very conscious about her identity. She is very conscious about her difference from the other women of the society, the upper caste women. So that is the kind of Dalit feminist consciousness that this poem brings to us, shares with the reader. And the reading of Dalit feminism or Dalit writings or Dalit feminist writings should not end with the text. It should make you the responsible reader, should take you outside the text, because meaning lies outside. That's why when I read this poem first time, the image that came to my mind from the image of the venomous fingers is the image of the hapless Walayar children, aging 9 and 12, who were brutally raped and murdered. So I think I will stop here, because we have hardly 15 minutes for discussion. There is one more poem which I really wanted to share with you. It's a very beautiful poem, a very striking poem. You might have read this poem. I can also show the slide of that poem, The Autobiography of a Bitch. You might have heard about the Gandhiji's autobiography, Nehru's autobiography, the first time that you hear the autobiography of a bitch. And its translation is also given there. And there's unfortunately no time to go for a discussion of the poem. And of course, it is this kind of translations that give Dalit women's writing visibility. But at the same time, there is a problem. And I really wanted to discuss with you the problem of translating Dalit work, Dalit writings, Dalit feminist writings. You compare the two translations, and also if you compare with this original, I couldn't get the Malayalam of the other poem, though I talked to Vigila. She sent me only the PDF of this poem. So if if you are interested, you can work on translation, the problem of translating Dalit writers. And I'm not totally negating the importance of translation, because most of the Dalit writers have published their works in vernacular. It is because of the efforts of the translators that they have become famous, or their voices got acceptance, and Dalit women got visibility. But at the same time, in translation, what is lost is poetry is also applicable in the case of Dalit women. For want of time, I shall not go to those issues now. And I think I can stop